Hello, chat. It's, uh, it's a nice day today here in Cincinnati. Team's on the road. Final weekend of regular season baseball. And the concourse cleaner is cleaning the ramp I usually use to start this podcast. So today will be a very special episode of me walking down the staircase instead of the access ramp. And starting on the lower concourse as opposed to the upper concourse. So that's exciting for anyone who literally watches this. But for those who are less watchers and more listeners, I want to believe nothing is really that different. Hopefully I don't set off any alarms. I typically like staying around the ramp because of the alarms. Oh my god. What? There's like a bunch of giveaway stuff, chat. I will avoid. I will try to navigate my way around. Oh. Interesting. Very cool. Okay. Giveaway. There's always like something happening at the park, chat, you know? It's not just baseball games. You got all sorts of other things that happen at these parks. They're event spaces at the end of the day. And should be used as such. Enjoy the park as often as you can through the summer, you know? So. And not in the summer. All right, a few questions today. I do have to keep it brief because I have a meeting in a little over 30 minutes. So try to keep this at 30 minutes today, which means I have to go very quickly. Or, I don't know. I'll go very Nick Wanningly. Is that the way to say it? First question. This was one that I couldn't get to because it was just a big chunky one, and now hopefully I can. But question being, if you had unlimited resources, what would you work on? I don't think it's any surprise that my angle would be very psychology, neuroscience related. I think no one's shocked by that answer from me. I'd obviously want emphasis on neuroscience, emphasis on psychology research, if I had unlimited resources. And so I love these questions because like the thought of what unlimited resources means in the context of something that kind of is not that expensive in terms of resources. Like what would that mean? And what would unlimited resources do, right? Like I think of like analytics, right? If you had unlimited resources, well, does that make one person do their job better? Not necessarily. So what would the unlimited resources allow you to do? Could their computers get faster, bigger, stronger, better? Sure. Could you hire 1,000 people? 10,000? 40,000? Like, like what would, and then if you did, like, what would they all work on? So I always think it's like, well, even if I had those resources, what would I spend them on? Neuroscience is interesting though, because It's difficult to do. There's not a lot of people who are at the intersection of like applied neuroscience. For the people who are, they usually aren't internal to a team, and and then attracting or recruiting people who are similar, it's very difficult because the intersection, which would require statistics, computer science of some sort, the neuroscience side, being able to just solo operate, it's all very difficult. So I would assume, as most people should assume, that would be very expensive, which it would be. That would be expensive, just from a personnel standpoint. So say you had all the people, well now you need the data, you need some way to get into the hardware of it, some idea of the software behind it, all the compliance related things. So if the question is like, oh, well, with unlimited resources, you just do neuroscience, well, great. The answer is that. But logistically, what is it? Like, is it neuroscience and also all this infrastructure and engineering stuff that would also need to work, that will also need to happen? Is it the buy-in? Like, unlimited resources, how do I get players to sit in an fMRI? If it's buy-in, like, how do I get, if it's unlimited resources, how do I get players to do cognitive testing every day? Like, what is unlimited resources? Am I going into like a player's contract and saying every time you do this, we give you X amount of dollars? Is that unlimited resources? Like, I do think there's a non-negligible amount of constraints, of logistics for the thought experiment of unlimited resources to actually be like, I don't know, I wouldn't say fun, but I would say it's not that it's not fun to think about this stuff, but it's also like, in a dream world where all of this is possible, what's realistic? And say you had a baseball team that had their own fMRI, their own ability to do all of this stuff. You have MRI techs available at any moment. Everyone went through all the training. Everyone like knows no metal near the thing. Everyone's effectively an MRI tech. Let's say it was all of that. Let's say it's every part of that. Everyone knows what's going on. Do players still go in? And we do functional magnetic resonance imaging on baseball. You're sitting in an MRI tube and you're watching pitches come in, and we're trying to see the perception from a neuroscience standpoint of the elite athlete. And you're incentivizing it. Every time they get in, let's say they get $1,000. And we want them in there every 2 weeks for the entire time they're under contract. So we get every 2 weeks, 6 years of control. If we drafted them and they're in the org and they're major league players. So, more data on one person and in a setting like this, and you have access to upwards 150 plus players doing it. Largest study related to baseball and neuroscience ever. Largest sample, most amount of trials, all resources available. You're paying them as they come in. You've incentivized it so they do come in consistently all the time. Okay. What would I get out of it? And academically, we'd know more about the elite athlete brain than we ever have any point of history in the world. Just from this one experiment, just from this situation. On top of that, we would be able to know specifically about this question something about the interaction of the brain, and then relate that to performance data. Are there differences depending on certain performance differences from one brain and how it's interconnected to another brain? Okay. And this is specific to hitting because I talked about batters in the tube watching pitches. But we're missing a lot of things. They're not physically taking a swing. They're laying as still as possible in something that they've never done. It's not helping them. They're not training. And depending on experiment fatigue, we might not even be measuring the thing we want to measure accurately. By academic standards, we're making them watch pitches. Okay. But nowhere in their game preparation are they ever watching or preparing for a game in this way. They're never constrained in a tube, only watching pitches, right? Definitely not 30 minutes or however long the experiment would take, but I would assume something around there. Maybe they're watching 100 pitches, okay? So call it 10 minutes plus another 10 minutes for all the equipment stuff to go through. So 20 minutes, you're in the tube. Are we even measuring what we want to measure in the right way? It's all set up exactly how all fMRI experiments are set up. It's the most data we've ever had. It's a population that is extremely rare to access. How do we use that to win more games? I think the answer is minimally, which is the interesting thing about unlimited resources. You had unlimited resources and you had all the nice to haves. Is that how many nice to haves outweigh a need? And I think that's where me and my older, wiser experience ends up having to balance the idea of even in the situation of unlimited resources, there are still limits when you're trying to apply things. So I would love unlimited resources to get people to do things that I think are great. But in terms of application, how long it's going to take us to get to analyze results and make them actionable, turn them into things that are important, helpful for us to win games, it's going to take a long time, and unlimited resources doesn't necessarily allow you to scale things as quickly as you want because you're limited to your own player pool You're limited to the 150 players and your 26 plus or minus 10 who end up being major leaguers that year. That's in comparison to all 29 other teams. You're at a disadvantage of data. And so how many years is it going to take to equate to one full year of what you would typically get from pitching data? And if the standard is thousands of pitches for things, how can you go out and argue, hey, we took like 20 players, scanned them all 20 times, which would be literally a groundbreaking landmark recording session of a study in terms of fMRI and this population. And the result is we have found the area of the brain that processes breaking balls. Okay, well, what does it do? We don't know, but it has more oxygen when they see and correctly recognize a non-fastball. Okay, how does it allow us to win? We don't know. That would be, with unlimited resources, the ideal conclusion. So, like I said, I think that would be awesome if you could actually say that. Like if you were able to say there's an interaction from frontal to occipital, that this network exists, and the stronger this network, the better pitch recognition, and you do things to optimize a particular network of the brain in order to increase a player's ability to do that, to do whatever you're analyzing. In this case, in my theoretical world, pitch recognition. But is that real? Is that true? Is it trainable? Is it state-based? Is it environment-based? Is it trait-based? Is it genetic? Are they elite because they are? Are they elite because how much of it was learned? Age-old question. So, that's a fun one. I just worry sometimes that the best answers are the ones that get your hopes up and break your heart, unfortunately. Okay, I swear I'm going to do these next two in the right amount of time. I told you that one was kind of meaty. I'm already on the top level of concourse. You know? It's a beautiful day in Cincinnati right now, by the way. All right, next. Someone asked about the eyewash of analytics. Like, what's something that's out there that's like, and we know a lot of it from the non-analytics world, like, oh, pitcher wins. Yeah, who the fuck cares, So there's some stuff like that on the non-analytics world, but what about in the analytics world? What's stuff that people say, at least my interpretation, what's stuff that people say that's like, gets kind of overblown or inflated in terms of importance, that I personally think, is kind of eyewash. I wrote down three things. Try to be brief. First is the idea that advanced stats are pound for pound better than your traditional statistics. Might be a spicy take, but hear me out. A lot of the time, when you're talking about like this stat versus that stat, WAR is a good example. WAR, without any other context, will give you the rank of a player in terms of their offense and their defense on the position side, and for pitching, their value as a pitcher, given the innings pitched. Okay. It's an omnibus, take into account everything, sum it into one thing. Okay. Then why are there these positive war players who are free agents, projected for positive war, were positive war last year, and they're just free agents out there in the open, better than certain players on the team? Why is that the case? And that kind of gets me into my second point of like, sometimes it's more than just the statistics. And a lot of the time, that's what it is. You know, you don't know if a guy's dealing with the personal stuff, coming back from injury that wasn't reported, dealing with family stuff, dealing with personal stuff. You don't know what a person's situation is outside of literally the numbers, literally the performance. You don't know if the guy is a nice guy or not a nice guy. You don't know if bringing a guy into a particular situation is good for them, it's good for the people on the team currently. There's a lot of different human elements. And for the giga-rational, like, well, that shouldn't matter, they're getting paid so much, they should just go out and perform. Well, what if just going out and performing is affected by these things? If you project a guy to be 3 WAR, you bring him in, and now they're put in a situation where they feel extremely uncomfortable and they're very stressed. Do you think that they're going to perform like a 3 WAR player as they were projected? And if your answer is yes, because that's what they were projected as, you are entering the world of eyewash. So, first thing is stats. Their advanced stats are more important than other stats. I think that's a little eyewash. It's all stats inclusive of each other, dependent on each other. And it's important to take into account all of those together. Like, people who are out there weighting one stat over another for cherry-picked arguments. Sure, you want to go win an argument on Twitter, want to go fight someone in a subreddit. Sure. Go nuts. But things that actually matter to winning games, optimizing team talent and performance on the field, when it actually matters, playing the game, it requires a lot more than just one number that you want to win a Twitter argument over. So I think a lot of people like, and it goes both ways, a lot of people like to emphasize a specific statistic irrespective of all other stats, and I think that's like missing the point. So that's one. Second one being what I mentioned, models are better at decision making. Models are better than people in terms of decision making. And when you start taking into account things like the person, their personal things that make them the best, that's an issue. That becomes a different toggle that's not necessarily quantifiable, right? Like, player has a child, first kid, starting a family, and the wife is back at home with the kid, grandparents are around, or the player's parents, the partner's parents, they're all around, but the baseball player is out on the road, gone for 6 months, every now and then checks in with the family when they're around the same coast. That's a stressful situation. And a vast majority of players who are in the situation will attest. That's very difficult. That's extremely difficult. So how do you make that quantified? How would you do that? How would you put that to a number? baby age and distance from mom and Boolean variable of whether or not your child's grandparents are like, you think a model's going to be able to do this? What about just like talking to the guy? What about like just getting on a phone with the guy and seeing if they're comfortable with the situation? Like, wouldn't that be better than the model? So when people are out there saying like, well, the model says this, therefore why would a human be more right? The model is more right than the person X amount of the time. Well, it's because the unquantifiable is precisely the noise that is in many ways impossible to reduce. To improve signal to noise ratio is to improve not just the quality of the data you get, but it's also the width, the span of the data that you have. And there are some things that you just will never have data on, and that affects performance. Everyone's had a bad day at work. Everyone's had a stressed out time at work. Everyone knows when like you had a bad work week and what was making your bad work week bad. And it's different for everyone. But it's work, it's performance. You were in it. Do you think those things could be put to numbers? And if you could put them to numbers, would you want them in numerical form? So, one more thing that I think is kind of eyewash is a lot of the time people are out there saying people in the industry know so much more than people in the public. Both in terms of like ball knowers and also in terms of research and development. But there's so much more internally. Now, I will say, there is more internally. There is. The public doesn't have access to all the minor league levels of baseball. The public doesn't have access to all of the international levels of baseball. The public doesn't have access to data that existed pre-StatCast era in these forms, minor leagues, international. You have some resources, right? You have Laman database that goes back really, really far. You got all your StatCast era stuff. But you definitely don't have the amount of data and the amounts baseball teams have. And there's also data that you just don't have because it's not public. Biomechanics data is not publicly made available. There's a lot of different metrics that exist for teams that don't exist publicly, related to a lot of different things. Raw frame-by-frame data to create all sorts of other new metrics, that doesn't exist for the public. So there's a lot of data that does exist in the private space that doesn't exist in the public space, but does that mean the public knows less? Because you're able to go on and read from Baseball Prospectus, Fangraphs, Baseball America, MLB, lots of different big reporting groups, and also like tons of researchers who ask these questions themselves. Like, hey, we know this data exists. Are people looking into XYZ? Are people looking into fielder positioning? Are people looking into the biomechanics of a fly ball? Are people looking into the biomechanics of infield ground balls? Are people looking into different things between levels and player development in relation to biomechanics? These are all things that people can't do publicly, but they're questions that are asked. Driveline does a great job at putting a lot of these areas, research areas, in the public eye, shining a light on all of this kind of stuff. as does many different independent researchers on social media, different places. So I don't think the public necessarily knows less. It has less to access. But in terms of question asking, in terms of what kind of data would be needed to answer a question, I think they're actually pretty good. Now, that is to say, the majority of the people who I'm talking about probably also don't spend full-time working hours dedicated to thinking and analyzing these kinds of questions, which once again puts the private sector ahead. But there are a lot of people who are very smart and might not have to spend as much time as, say, I, to come up with similar questions. So I wouldn't be surprised if some people in the public are actually a lot closer. And luckily for those people, they're actually pretty popular in the social media space. But I wouldn't necessarily think the private sector is. I wouldn't say the private sector is so incredibly far ahead that in the public space there's just no worthwhile endeavor to even dabble in what the people in the public are doing. It's why teams go to conferences. It's why teams still read up on the public space in terms of blogs, new research, community research. Because there are people out there with the skills or the thoughts that can be molded into the next great baseball analyst, sports analytics person. So, okay, chat. Had one more, but we're over time and I gotta go to this next meeting. So, hopefully that was enough. We're coming down to it of streams. Next week, I will only have 15 streams left. So this pod, like I said, I'm going to continue doing it so long as people continue asking questions. So been happy to see the Discord pretty active for that. So please keep putting questions in. I will read them and answer them accordingly. I'll catch y'all later.